Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're undertaking an expedition, not just into history, but into one of the most stubborn and I think beguiling mysteries of ancient knowledge. We're talking about the Dogon Enigma. Imagine we're traveling high up onto these sandstone cliffs, the Bandagra Cliffs in Mali. This is the home of the Dogon people. They're a culture of farmers, master sculptors, and this is the key part. According to decades of research, they are shockingly precise astronomers. And this isn't just about, ancient stargazing. It's about what you might call impossible knowledge. Our mission today is to really unpack the specific, challenging details of their cosmology, particularly everything concerning the star system Sirius, and to try and understand why this puzzle is just so captivatingly difficult to solve. I mean, the big question is, how did a culture with no written records, no telescopes, have knowledge of a star that is completely invisible to the naked eye?
It's the ultimate deep dive on this, because we're going right to that core conflict.
Yeah.
For decades, you've had researchers just wrestling with this possibility, that the Dogon might hold fragments of a highly advanced and maybe forgotten chapter in human history. And what's so crucial to understand from the start is that this is not just an isolated story in Mali.
Right.
You see hints of similar star knowledge, similar celestial teachers.
Yeah.
They're often described as amphibious or luminous beings. And you see these similar cosmic histories appearing all over the place, across Africa, the Middle East, even the Americas. We're really looking for cosmic echoes across global mythology.
All right, let's unpack this then. Let's start with the source of the knowledge itself. It all begins with the Dogon oral tradition, which says their ancestors were visited by beings they call the Nomo.
The Nomo are the absolute key to this entire deep dive. They're described as amphibious, luminous beings who descended from the sky.
In a vessel, right?
In a noisy spinning vessel. And according to the Dogon, these beings didn't originate on Earth. They came from a world that was orbiting Sigitolo.
And Sigitolo is the Dogon name for Sirius, which is, of course, the brightest star in our night sky.
Exactly.
And this is the point where we shift from, interesting mythology to something that feels like potential historical dynamite. The specific details were gathered by two French anthropologists, Marcel Griol and Germaine Dieterlen. This was extensive field work in the 1940s and 50s. And get this is where it gets really interesting. They were told by Dogon elders that the Sirius star system was actually made up of two stars.
Right. So there's the main one, Sirius A, the one we can all see.
But the Dogon insisted on the existence of this companion star, Sigitolopo, which we know today as Sirius B.
Hold on. So you're telling me that a culture relying purely on oral tradition and naked eye observation, they accurately described a star, Sirius B, that is so dim and so small that you can only see it with a powerful modern telescope.
Exactly that. And the level of detail goes so far beyond just, oh, there's a star there. Sorry. The Dogon knew its orbit around Sirius A was elliptical and that it took 50 years.
50 years. That is an incredibly precise number.
Yeah.
It's scientifically accurate. How do you observe that with the naked eye? You can't.
You can't. And this is where the skeptical argument, that they must have just picked this up from modern contact or something, this is where it starts to break down.
Because the Dogon also described Sirius B as white, small, dense, and, this is crucial, the heaviest thing there is.
The heaviest thing there is. Think about that description. That's about density.
Yes.
Sirius B is a white dwarf star. It's the collapsed core of a dead star. It's about the size of Earth, but a single teaspoon of its material would weigh tons.
It is, scientifically speaking, one of the densest things in the known universe. That's not a detail you just guess.
No. So this raises the big question, the one that anthropologists are still fiercely debating. How did they know?
I mean, Sirius B was only predicted, theoretically, in the mid-19th century. And it wasn't actually confirmed with photographs and spectroscopy until the early 20th century.
So this specific scientific description, it existed in the Dogon oral tradition for centuries before modern science even caught up.
So you have these two main camps in the debate. On one side, you have people who say this is definitive proof of contact with some advanced, maybe non-human civilization. The Nomo.
And the skeptics, what do they propose?
Well, the skeptical academic community, they're always looking for diffusion, not intervention. So they offer a couple of counter-arguments. One is that Griol and Dieterlen, maybe unintentionally, they might have introduced the idea of Sirius B while they were questioning the elders for decades.
So, like, they accidentally planted the idea?
Exactly. And the Dogon elders incorporated it maybe to please the researchers. The other major theory is early cultural diffusion.
Meaning the knowledge traveled somehow?
Right. Maybe it came up in the Nile from Egypt, where Sirius was incredibly important, and then somehow survived centuries of being passed down orally while retaining these incredibly specific details.
But that's the part that feels like a stretch, right? The defense of the Dogon tradition argues that those details, the 50-year orbit, the insane density, they're just too precise.
They are. If the knowledge was just planted, why would the elders insist on a 50-year orbit? That's a very specific number for calculation.
All right.
Why not a round number like 40 or 60?
It's the crux of the enigma. It really resists a neat academic dismissal.
And if the Nomo, the supposed source of all this, are the only explanation the Dogon themselves offer, then we have to look closer at who or what they were.
Okay, let's shift focus to them. The nature of these cosmic teachers. Dogon mythology is really clear that these were not spirits or gods in the way we think of them.
No, they were described as biological beings.
Sky-descending entities who came here specifically to bring order and civilization.
Yes. They're consistently described as amphibious, which implies they needed water, some kind of fluid environment. And they were luminous.
Shimmer. And their job was to be ethical reformers and to bring this advanced cosmological knowledge. They basically jump-started human understanding, according to the story.
And the way they arrived is what the extraterrestrial proponents always point to.
The skyboat.
The skyboat, yeah. It landed with this great thunder and wind, and it violently shook the Earth when it arrived.
Now, this is where we have to be careful, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Scholarly caution. Mythic language is designed to convey meaning and power through metaphor. A skyboat with thunder. That could easily be symbolic language for a comet, a powerful storm, a spiritual vision.
Of course.
The challenge for any historian is that when you pair that symbolic imagery with the highly technical, very non-symbolic detail about a white dwarf's 50-year orbit and its density, the purely symbolic interpretation starts to strain under the weight of the data. It forces you to ask the question, was the Nomo origin story the only way the Dogon could frame scientifically advanced information that they received somehow?
That's the dynamic we're balancing here. Literal truth versus profound metaphor. And whether you see the Nomo as actual aliens or symbols of innovation or evidence of some lost global knowledge, the pattern of celestial teachers goes way beyond the cliffs of Mali.
Right. The Dogon are absolutely not alone in telling stories like this.
This is the moment to connect it to the bigger picture then. We see these echoes across continents.
We really do. Let's start in Mesopotamia. With the Sumerians, over 4,000 years ago, they talked about the Anunnaki.
Sky beings.
Exactly. Sky beings who descended to Earth to teach the fundamentals of civilization. Writing, math, agriculture, how to build cities, and sophisticated astronomy.
And just like the Dogon, the Sumerians had a complex relationship with Sirius. They called it Mulkak Sisai, the arrow star, and it was associated with powerful gods of judgment and cosmic order.
And what's so fascinating is that shared motif. You have this external intervention that leads to this rapid jump in civilization. And just like the amphibious Nomo, Sumerian mythology has a strong connection to water.
Like Enki.
Exactly, Enki, the god of wisdom and water. So you have two civilizations separated by thousands of miles who never met. And they share these core narrative elements: sky-descending teachers, sacred astronomy, and a link to water.
Then we can just move a little bit northeast of the Dogon homeland to ancient Egypt. For them, Sirius was everything.
It was absolutely vital. Sirius, or Sopdet, was the basis of their entire calendar. The priests had such precise knowledge of its cycle that it literally governed the flooding of the Nile.
The foundation of their whole society. I mean, think about that level of precision. To base your entire calendar and your survival on the exact day of the heliacal rising of a star, that implies centuries of meticulous high-level observation.
And again, the mythology ties the celestial to a civilizing force. The god Osiris, who brought agriculture and law to Egypt, was said to come from the Duat, a celestial region that many people link directly to the Sirius system.
And the goddess Isis was explicitly associated with the star itself. We even have inscriptions that describe visitors arriving from a celestial land.
So now we have the Dogon, the Sumerians, and the Egyptians, all in relative proximity, all placing these celestial, often water-associated teachers and advanced civilization right at the foot of the Sirius system.
It starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like, well, either cultural diffusion or maybe a shared source of knowledge that's now lost.
But the pattern keeps going, and it crosses the Atlantic. That's what challenges the simple diffusion models.
Right. In North and South America, indigenous cultures have these strikingly similar stories.
The Hopi, for instance, they spoke of the Kachina beings. They were described as star travelers who taught early humans everything from ethics to construction.
And the Maya and the Aztecs. They had incredibly advanced star calendars, calendars that show a massive degree of mathematical and astronomical skill, and they wrote about gods descending from the heavens to start their societies.
And it echoes the Nomo and Enki again. You go down to South America, and Colombian and Amazonian tribes describe luminous first beings, sometimes amphibious, who came from the sky and taught them everything they needed to organize their societies and survive.
So when you look at this whole global constellation of myths, the pattern it's profound.
It's uncanny. Despite no direct contact that we know of between the Dogon, Sumerians, Egyptians, Hopi, or Maya, their core stories all resonate. They all tell of non-human beings bringing cosmic knowledge and civilization from the heavens.
Okay, so we've laid out the facts, the global parallels. Now we have to ask the critical question, what does it all mean?
Right. When historians and scientists look at this, they have those generally accepted explanations we touched on.
They point to shared human archetypes.
Yeah.
The idea that all cultures will just independently invent myths about powerful beings coming from the sky because it satisfies some, shared human need for explanation.
And of course, there's the very powerful explanation of diffusion, that these ancient ideas, especially on those vital trade routes between Mesopotamia and Egypt, just slowly seeded these beliefs across Africa.
And those are sound, responsible theories. They explain a lot of cultural similarities.
They do. But this is why the Dogon case is so stubborn. While those theories can explain the myth of a celestial teacher, they don't comfortably explain the specific scientific data.
That's the qualitative difference, isn't it? It's one thing for a myth to describe a sky god. It's another thing entirely for that same myth to include the empirically verifiable 50-year elliptical orbit of an invisible star.
That specificity, it just resists being dismissed as a simple archetype.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the most intriguing loose end in this whole story. The mystery of Sirius C.
Ah, yes. The controversy around Sirius C takes the Dogon knowledge from just difficult to explain to potentially scientifically impossible to explain.
Because their oral tradition doesn't just include Sirius A and Sirius B. It includes references to a third star in that system.
They call it Emiatolo, the son of women, and it's described as being slightly smaller than Sirius B.
Now, in modern astronomy, the idea of Sirius C it's highly controversial. For decades, astronomers have been looking for gravitational anomalies, anything that might indicate a third body.
And some studies have occasionally suggested, yeah, maybe there's a low-mass companion, a red dwarf or something, causing a little wobble in the system. But those findings are often refuted, or they just lack definitive confirmation.
So, in short, modern science is still grappling with the definitive structure of the Sirius system. It's an active debate. It's elusive.
And yet, the Dogon have been talking about this third star for centuries, describing a component that our best science may or may not ever confirm.
When you stack that on top of their accurate knowledge of the invisible Sirius B, the whole narrative just refuses to be classified as coincidence or cultural hearsay.
It suggests a much deeper, more ancient shared body of precise astronomical knowledge.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, we've seen this complex convergence of creation myth, global echoes of sky teachers, and what looks like hard astronomical data, all revolving around one star, Sirius. It really demands a level of respect for ancient knowledge that conventional history can sometimes overlook.
And whether you believe the Nomo were actual visitors or just a personification of ancient human genius, the sources show us that our timeline of technological advancement, it might need a reevaluation.
And that's where we'll leave you today. It leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? If cultural diffusion and shared archetypes can comfortably explain the stories of sky-descending teachers, fine. But do they also comfortably explain the highly specific, invisible white dwarf knowledge and the persistent, centuries-old mention of a potential Sirius C?
That unresolved detail, that possibility that the Dogon had knowledge of a part of a star system that our own science is still grappling with, that's a powerful prompt for further exploration into the history we think we know.